listening to Smashing the Party. This is your host, Nate Baumberger.
Biden's grandma's play. I'm calling tonight's show Biden's grandma's play. What do I mean by that? Listen, this is a crazy one today. I'm going to tell you a couple stories. I'm going to weave some narrative into it, some personal narrative into this tonight's show. But what I'm going to talk about is kind of mind-blowing, and it's relevant, and it's something we can all agree on, I think. I think this is a topic that crosses the aisle. We all have grandmas. Now, I will say that this is mostly an American thing, I think. For those that don't know what I'm talking about nursing homes in America. That, as I understand it, is a largely American cultural thing. A lot of other countries take care of their older people. What a concept. I didn't validate this. I just get a hunch. That's kind of the feeling I get when I talk about these things with people from other countries, in particular Latin America and Caribbean countries. So for what it's worth, nursing homes are a cottage industry in the United States. It's insane the amounts of money, and the trajectory they've had in the last 25, 30 years has been insane. And largely it's because of a couple reasons, and I'm going to get into it. I'm going to weave some personal web. I'm not going to talk too much. Look, if you're a family member and you're watching, I'm not going to talk personal shit, but I also don't want to kind of sabotage or critique any local facilities or anything like that. I'm talking about the industry as a whole. We can all relate to that decision. I've been talking about old Joe. I mean, now I'm just talking about old grandma. We all know old grandpa we want him to live a long, healthy life. Sometimes there are situations where putting him in a nursing home or a facility like that makes sense. Happened in my family. It was a difficult situation in my family. I remember going to rest homes at a young age, so I think that was a cultural thing in our family and we had a lot of folks live to be very long, old people. So for me, going to a rest home when I was younger was a traumatic experience, and my brothers and sisters that are younger, my age and younger, definitely know what I'm talking about, because there were people just kind of wandering in the halls, and it was bizarre. And this was a local one, and I know it's a nice facility now, and I don't want to just say too much, but so I remember going there as a young age to visit my Aunt Lizzie, and she lived to be she was really old, and it was just a place where I didn't understand why we went. I didn't know much about her, although she was real sweet and nice, and it was always just an experience going into these places. And so my mom was very good at also kind of taking in her elder parents and older parents in general. It wasn't like our family just put people in rest homes, but I think they lived so long where it became easier in some cases to do that. So this is a little personal, and I don't want to, I don't have a pro rest home or pro anti nursing home position, by the way. But what I'm talking about today is interesting. And if you work in the industry, you know this, but rest homes are hard to keep staffing. They're usually understaffed, and there's a lot of money in it. But every single time, what's interesting is they've done these studies, and they find that the profit margins are, under 3%. You'll find reports like that, and you'll see all this data points that support that there's a large amount of administrative fees and a large amount of salaries. And then, of course, there's all these other kind of costs that go along with it that are real costs. But what's interesting about it when you dig under, and it took like 10 years for them to figure out. The first study they did, they found that there were some different ways they were doing the payments, so that how they were doing their books. They were discounting some of their depreciation differently, and so forth and so on. This is industry-wide. Not everybody, not every single entity, but these larger kind of conglomerates that came about, for lack of a better term, started doing these things where they're like, hey, there's a lot more profit here. And so then they did the study, and they're like, yeah, there's more profit. And they raised it to like 8%. 10 years later, or like maybe 12 years later, the same folks looked at it again. They were like, wait a second. If you look at where these payouts are going, they're going to the owners of these people. And so these people own these companies that are on the payout side. And so they're paying themselves. So that's profit going directly to these owners. So again, an unregulated level of that game was where the capitalist market took over and people found a way to extract money from the system and throw a benefit out there, but also hedge their bets by absorbing the risk, essentially hiding that risk. And so understaffing would happen, and they could say to everybody, look, we're taking Medicare, we're showing you our reports, everything's, and then they started digging into the reports and who were getting the money. They realized that it increased the amount of profits like by $11 billion or something like that. So again, that's money that's being extracted out of the system. And so I'm telling you this, not every single rest home operates this way. And again, we have a strong local community around here that has some good rest homes and nursing homes. And like I said, I've been to many of them, and I'm not here to disparage anyone's local business. I promise you. I know I have followers that work at different rest homes, but I think they'll also admit that they're understaffed. And so why am I talking about this problem? You're probably wondering, is because it came up in my feed, whether it was Facebook just throwing me a bone or whatever, who knows? I don't know. But it came up in one of my feeds on Smashing the Party, just talking about this law. And I looked into it, and it is a real thing. And so, it was something that's been going on for a while where they've been trying to figure out how to rein this in and get it properly staffed. And why I think it's relevant to everyone and crosses party lines, it should at least, is that we've all had to have that situation where you get to well, maybe you haven't yet, but it's a difficult one when you get to the point. And I would say that I was largely sheltered from making those decisions by the ranking in my family, by the hierarchy of people that are older than me. So I'm not going to sit here and say I was like instrumental in deciding that or even had anything to do with it. But I will say that that decision, I'm sure, especially with my dad's condition, was difficult in that case. So, and again, I'm trying to make sure I don't talk too much, and I don't want to just disparage, because I think I was fortunate to have brothers and sisters that did a lot of the heavy lifting, all of it. And then also, we had the means to be able to support some of the conditions and stuff he had. So it's a unique situation, but I still had to interact with the place. And I would say from my personal experience, I'm not fond of it. And so that's one of the reasons why I wasn't very interactive, let's just say. True story. I admit it. You can judge me or not. But anyway, so, I think but everyone understands people get older. We're watching the president get older in real time, right? So this is kind of relevant. So this thing pops up, and it's talking about the CEO of the Oklahoma kind of largest kind of conglomerate of residential nursing homes, care centers, said it's going to destroy him. These new rules that were instituted by the Department of Health in one of their kind of sub departments that manages the Department of Aging. And so through this ruling from the executive branch, which is this Department of Health under subcommittee thing, sub component, just think of Department of Health. And this is one of those alphabet places that the executive branch has that the Supreme Court recently cut the balls up, by the way. This is all kind of mixing together. I promise you, this isn't conspiratorial. When you watch the show, there's a narrative here, right? It all works together, and these people understand how to pull the levers to get what they want. And if you're watching, you can kind of see it happen. Anyway, so we're trying to paint that picture. So this ruling came about basically from the years and years of like trying to figure out where all the money's going and them trying to get Medicare reimbursements and everyone complaining. Truthfully, one of the reasons why this new rule came about is because people are complaining. Workers, residents, children, parents, relatives of the folks that are in these homes and the folks that work saying, look, they're understaffed. And so this is just painting the picture across the nation that there's this deficit in care. And of course, we all know, even with the highest quality care that you pay for, you always want more. And so what happens is government says, look, you have to have, if you're going to call yourself a residential care, you have to have a minimum amount of care that you provide somebody. So this is where government actually says, listen, you can't just call yourself a residential care place and open up beds and throw a nurse in there and have 25 people. You can't do that. Free market would say, why not? Because as long as people are living and you're just collecting money, you're making a profit, and sure. So government steps in and says, Department of Health says, we got to have some baseline of care. Like you got to spend this amount of time with, and they got to have this amount of RNs or LPNs, which is licensed practical nurses, and then RNs, which are registered nurses, a little bit more training, no disrespect to nurses. So there's different levels of care that's required, right, based on government incentive. So they did this. So this has been going on. If you do a little research digging into it, it started back in like 2011. Pennsylvania actually talked about a $511 million net income in that business. It's way more than that in Pennsylvania, by the way. Now, that was 2011. You can start to track the statistics, though, and see that there's across the board major money maker. And you can even look at our local resident places and they're money makers. And if they're not, there's an interesting kind of thing that could be going on potentially, which one of the studies that I dug through underlined that, hey, look, there's a lot more money in these places than we realized because of how they structure the payments internally. Since they're not part of any healthcare system, they're kind of open them up and you can just kind of keep building them. You have to have a certain minimum requirement of staffing, which was very low, and you could kind of finagle that depending on how you wrote your books to keep that low, which did directly result in the kind of pervasive feeling from everybody, which is everyone's kind of feels like, oh no, I don't want to send them to a rest home because typically you don't know what kind of quality care you're going to get, no matter what the cost or dollar bill might be. Your parent or your sibling or your brother or relative or partner may need a certain amount of care that they're not able to provide, and not at their fault of anyone that works there, by the way. So I'm just calling that out, saying that because of how they're structured and the monies that they're required to report, a lot of money's getting extracted out of the back and put into these other companies. And so if you're on the owner side of residential, nursing homes, you're in the good. You're making, it's your heyday is coming to an end, which is exactly what this CEO of this large company in Oklahoma said, apparently, allegedly, based on my news feed, which I'm always going to have to say allegedly now, because even when I dig through, if I don't find a really good source, I'm going to have to add allegedly. So I found several good sources on the legislation, but I didn't find as much on the CEO. And now that could be just because, he's probably made it to a couple local papers and it may not have, I don't know. So allegedly, but the story pans out based on the legislation, the track record. So bear with me if you're fact checking me, and which if you are fact checking me, good job. Keep me honest. Send me a comment. Tell me I suck. I don't care. Whatever. Anyway, the story stands. So we've got this issue with these, entities that are collecting a lot of money, not showing it. The government doesn't have a real gauge on their profit centers until more recently. And so there's a movement to say, look, we've got to hold this accountable. Unions start stepping in and say, look, you're understaffed. We're union. Unions represent nurses all over the country. So they're stepping in. And of course, people are like, oh my, now it's all ruined. No, we're talking about grandma and grandpa or brother, uncle, Nate, wherever you're sending somebody, you want them to at least get basic care. And it's so mind-blowing that that's pervasive enough where it's not looked at necessarily as a favorable place to work in some cases because of, well, they're going to be understaffed and you're always doing this and you're having to do this and no one's listening. And so, I'm painting the picture of perceptions that are real. I can see that I know people in the business, I know the industry, and I've experienced it. I was fortunate enough to have a sister that was amazingly good at doing all the caretaking, like incredible, like off the charts. She's a nurse. So, it's built in it's a feature. But I know the amount of work that she put in was significant, and it was like she wasn't working there. We were just fortunate enough to have her be an active and be in a position where she could do that. Not anyone's situation. Anyone that wouldn't have that would be at a disadvantage. And so, again, that's why I say the situation was not only the fact that the facility was good and did well, but I had siblings that really were able to just participate in the care in the facility for the most part, I would say. So, it was different. Not everyone could do that, again. So these, you expect when you're getting a certain amount of care that you pay per month or whatever. And you're, a lot of times you're selling assets and doing all kinds of things to put your loved one into these homes. You're hoping some kind of basic care, right? This is the whole point. So having standards is important, and this new rule that just got passed and kind of got reinforced and got passed under Biden. Let me just see what it's called again. I think it's the Medicare and Medicaid programs, minimum staffing standards for long-term care facilities and Medicaid institutional payment transparency reporting. So in order to get Medicaid, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and those two agencies got together and said, look, we've got to have a minimum staffing standard if we're going to give government money to any place. And government money is, where a lot of fraud happens, as we know, unfortunately. And I'm not saying I agree with necessarily how we're doing it. I say we should be all in a single pool. We all have the same risk. And, I'm all about that socialist health care where we share the risk and we have low premiums. And we all never have to worry about health care because we're all just we all want to live just the normal, no profit center, yada, yada. Crazy, crazy utopian world. I talk about it. But this is interesting because the final rule establishes minimum staffing standards for long-term care facilities as part of the Biden-Harris administration's nursing home reform initiative to ensure safe and quality care in long-term care facilities. In addition, this rule requires states to report the percentage of Medicaid payments for certain Medicaid-covered institutional services that are spent on compensation for direct care workers and support staff. So one of the ways they were hiding money is they were saying, look, we're doing payments to these organizations that provide staffing. So they're running staffing agencies. No offense to staffing agency, but a lot of money can be funneled through a staffing agency and say, look, we're running staffing, and so we're paying these staffing, essentially just paying these folks on contract wages and just extracting the money directly out and suggesting that it's going to an entity when it's not. It's just another organization that I own in the system, right? And so, you're kind of owning the whole pipeline, the old person pipeline, if you will, in that realm. So this law that was instituted, or this rule, it's important I say rule, because remember, if you watch and you've listened recently, balls were clipped of the executive branch's enforcement power of any rule they come up with, because the Supreme Court has decided that they can't really write laws. So any rule could be deemed executive branch creating a law, which then could be overridden. And how does the executive branch actually institute laws? So the Supreme Court then can overrule and then interpret whether something is part of the law or whether it's a rule that exists that they're trying to make something happen, but it shouldn't happen because the law doesn't exist. I know that sounds crazy, but if you play it back slowly, it makes sense. The reason why I say that is because it was literally the complexity of this is to their advantage, that they can do these things and move the wheels so that when they want to do these other things, they can move those things through. I know that's not the fucking most articulate explanation, but we'll get there. Just listen over time. All right. So this minimum staffing standard comes out, and its implementation was effective June 21st, 2024. Now, the effective date was June 21st, 2024. The implementation date, as set forth in this section, regulations must be implemented upon the effective date. So one of the core features is you have to get to the staffing, required minimum staffing by, I think the first one kicks in 5 years. And then everything, basically, you have to have the facility ready for intellectual disabilities and all these things that are required that you have to support to get government money. So all these facilities are going to have to actually perform and do the things that you think they're supposed to do ultimately. And one of the things is they have to increase their staffing because there's they lay out in the bill the rule that says, look, if you have this amount of folks, if you have this amount of people, you have to have this amount of LPNs and this amount, and they basically jack that up. And so one of the things, back to the CEO. So the CEO of this large organization in Oklahoma has already been griping about this for a long time, writing letters to Congress, lobbying. By the way, this organization or this domain has a large lobby, huge lobby. Think of it, the big old people. You know, we got big oil, we got big old people, big old nursing home people. Like we've got big pharma. I'm going to call it big old because that's a whole thing. We got big prison. You know, we got big tech. We got big banks. We got big investment firms. We've got all these big entities. They're so huge and they have lobbies. And these lobbies then kind of move and keep things the way they want to. So there's been some deference for a long time because they've been able to do these tricks to keep payments coming their way and saying, hey, look, we don't have any money. We need more funding, and then not showing the funding going towards the things they were supposed to have the funding go to. Now, this isn't every single rest home, but this is why this legislation came about. So this is one of the things when Republicans say, oh, I want to remove any regulation. No, this is more regulation, but for a specific reason to provide a baseline of what a consumer would expect when they send mom and pa off to the rest home to be taken care of. So, you know, when you say this rule is a great thing, it literally, I'm calling it Biden's grandma play that Democrats should be talking about. Like every single pitch, don't forget, he's taking care of you guys, and we're not going to make it a shameful or difficult thing to send them away to a place where they can get the quality care, knowing they're going to get the quality care. And we, you know, in many cases, it's not like people are, and I don't want to give the impression people just like, all right, send them off to rest home. In some cases, rest homes can be more comfortable than being in a home where you have the stress of, and so there's many reasons. I'm not here to argue on that. But when the situation arises, and it will arise for many people, you can't just think, oh, it's never going to happen to me. Okay, so I'm just not going to think about it. No. If it does, or you know people, or you've experienced people that get to a point where you can't take care of them in the way you want to, and you have to do those things, or you choose to do those things because the quality care now is going to be significantly better, you want to know you're getting your bang for your buck for grandma and grandpa, okay? So I think it's important. But one of the things that this CEO, back to this Oklahoma dude who's been lobbying and going crazy, is the first thing he says, he's like, you know, this is going to kill us off. He's like, we're going to have to basically have, you know, add $500 million to the payroll in 5 years or whatever. And it's like, you look at the profits and it's in rural areas. And so the numbers I'm skewing. But then you look at the amount of profits and the amount of facilities he has. At an average of $3 million a facility, which is what they averaged out a profit for facility, per facility, net income per facility. That's an operating net income, you know what I mean? Like they're operating. And that's average for every single facility. There's like tons of them, right? And they all are kind of going to one funnel in many cases. So I didn't do this fucking Dateline dig into the structure of the old folks, big old folks, you know, as I'll call it. Maybe that's a better term. But I found it interesting that the first thing the CEO says is that they're going to lose significant amounts of money. It's going to take them. He said it's going to kill the industry. And I can tell you that if an industry is going to be killed because it's poorly servicing its people, then I would argue that it needs to be wiped out. Like maybe it shouldn't operate at all. If you can't really say, oh, well, we can't provide basic level care for this industry to exist, then it really isn't a good industry. It should be just wiped out. It's not providing a good service. And I will say, for the folks that work there and the people that have been complaining, the 40,000 comments this thing got when it went to get kind of public opinion were all coming from folks that had interacted and dealt with the big old folks. And again, I'm not painting a broad stroke on every single one, but just like when I worked in the mortgage business, I had to kind of stand up and say, yeah, I did work in subprime, but I wasn't the reason. Not everyone operated in the way that they're painting the entire industry. And so, I knew that it wasn't directed at me. So don't take it personal. This is kind of how things work. And sometimes you get caught up in the flow of working for a subprime mortgage company where you're just trying to help people and you don't realize that you're also extracting significant amounts of wealth from them. Okay. So true story. You could say I knew or I didn't care, but I look back and I was always trying to do the right thing, but it was a lot of money that was made for transactions that could be done for less. So do I have guilt about it? No, but I just know that the system kind of creates scenarios like that. And I try to avoid them, which is why I pick and choose. I'm a picky guy. Anyway, so want to get to this grandma play and why I like it. I really do like it because I feel like it's something that we can just relate with. And if you don't relate it, maybe, I don't know, maybe there are people that have strong positions against rest homes. They don't want to be in them maybe for many reasons. And maybe you don't get visitors, but I think that, my when I started this talking about why I didn't like them, it just kind of was spooky for me. There were people just kind of meandering around, and there were people that you knew that just had no visitors. And so it just seemed like a sad place. But if you could properly staff them and make them pleasant places for everyone, right? I know it sounds like utopia, but we're talking about places that are rural that are going to have to go from 4 nurses to, with the new requirements, are going to have to go to hire 10 more. So now if you're in the nursing business and you're saying, wait, 4 nurses and the minimum basic federal minimum requirement, we want to be better than the federal minimum, is to have 14 and you're at 4. Think about the people they're hiring. Think about the work environment. Think about how stressful that's going to be for any nurse that's trying to manage and spin those plates. So you're already thinking, I don't want to go to work there. And not every facility operates this way. If grandma and grandpa or your relative are in a local facility, I'm not suggesting anyone is problematic specifically that I know of personally around here. But I think that if you start to look across the industry, like I said, there's a lot of good places. There's a lot of good mortgage companies. When the mortgage industry was going down, I had to stand out and say, look, we're not one of the bad guys. So same kind of thing. And I really want to make that clear because a lot of folks work for, there's a large community of resident homes and nursing homes than local, 55 and older. I'm pushing 50 soon. But the point I know, but the point I'm making is that, this is relevant. And I think you can see how having a Department of Health that can study these mundane, boring things and say, look, this is actually something we need to watch because it can inflict a lot of ripple effects on families, communities, the quality of care, representation, especially the vulnerable position you're typically in when you're going into a rest home. And maybe you don't have family and you're going in alone or you, for whatever reason. So there's a huge amount of vulnerability and scandal that can happen around the whole scenario. And that doesn't mean everyone there is a scammer or anything like that. But this rule just states the new minimum. And so the private market says, whoa, this is going to destroy us, and we're going to have to increase the staffing to keep up with these new standards. And I'm thinking, okay, that sounds good, and the money's there, so what's the problem? Well, it comes down to they need to now do a lot more reporting and show a little bit more transparency on how they're doing their payouts to these other companies. And so it's going to, they already know that's happening. But it's just forcing their hand to say, look, you're going to use the money that we're giving you. So you're saying you need more. You're saying you're not getting enough. We're going to show you that you have enough and you're just not using what you're using. Or, you're going to just play by the rules and maybe you're operating the right way. But these rules show a base minimum where you're going to send your old family members to, or they're going to end up, or you or me, however. So it's a whole industry that's making tons of money that's now going to be required to have bare minimum standards of staffing in order to get any kind of public funding and operate for the most part, because it's going to fall down to the states to fund that. And they're going to say, no, you're not operating with these base minimums. And so it's going to ripple effect right down to the state level. The state's going to probably follow up with the same standards and say, no, we've got to make sure that we're at least keeping with the federal standards, because otherwise we're going to have to do a lot more work when, and argue with the federal government. So it's going to ripple effect through everything. And that's not a good thing if you're an owner of a rest home, of a conglomerate that is big old folks. So I think this is something that is irrelevant. Can you make a quick 30-second commercial? Sure. I'm not saying I'm doing the 30-second commercial. I'm just telling you, this came in my feed. I found it interesting, and you dig a little bit, you start to see, okay, it's a perfect example of where government can do the right thing, needs to have this department that everyone's like, I'm going to remove the Department of Health, Department of Education. There's examples I can give about the Department of Education. Do the same thing. We know about big ones too, by the way. I'm not going to get into that right now, but certainly this is why it's very important for the executive branch to have these entities and have them staffed with experts, nonpartisan experts, not vetted conservatives or vetted liberals, nonpartisan experts. Maybe the appointee can be political and that can sway the organization, but internally, these are going to be people that are looking at data and things like that. And that's what you want, so they can say, no, this is good policy to say you got to have a bare minimum of 3 nurses per, and it's per, it gets so specific where they're like, you need to have 3.29 hours of RN per day and 1.2 hours of LPN per day, and then some kind of other. So they get specific into how you have to staff. And if it's going to require hiring a staffing manager. Sometimes you're going to now have to hire a manager and so forth. So it is a drastic thing, but where was the money going before that? I mean, you're driving around, you're in yachts, and you're doing all this stuff. And it's like, where's it going? Not everyone. But you look at some of these older residential places, even the lucrative ones, and there's a lot of money in it. And they're expensive. Some of these places cost anywhere from $5 to $25, $35 and more a month. So it can get crazy. And if you have insurance, great. But if you don't have insurance, then you're kind of left to fork over your assets. So it's a vulnerable time. And I found that it was interesting that the counterpoint was that we're just going to have to provide better service now. And when you start to look at the numbers, if the government wouldn't have stepped in, like, it would continue. And you see the trajectory of profit. The industry has just gone wild since 2010. I don't know what Barack Obama did. I don't know what happened or what regulation or free handout or what happened, but it seems like somewhere in the 2000s, I'm just going to hope that it was before Barack Obama. It was before Barack Obama, 2004. No, but somehow the trajectory seems to go off the charts in that industry, and it becomes big old folks instead of just kind of under the weather old folks. I don't know. Something happened. Who knows? Maybe it's just over time. But you can check it out and do a little research, and kind of you're going to find mixed signals on the profits because you're going to have reporting done for analysts. One of I find this very interesting, by the way. One of the kind of tells that is out there in the industry about why there's more profit than is being shown is because investment firms and REITs and real investment kind of entities that pull together to buy real estate and they get certain tax benefits if you invest at so Wall Street, let's just paint the broad stroke of Wall Street. Investment firms, private equity is funneling money into these larger old folks, and that tells us that somehow they wouldn't just throw money at something that's showing 3% profit. So you'll see numbers like 3% or 0.08% profit after depreciation. But they get tricky and throw numbers around. These might not be the accurate numbers, but they play with numbers to say, well, it's not really that profitable. But in the back end, you've got investment happening, large investment firms, large investment money, big money going into the back end. So why would this low investment, very not profitable domain be getting so many eyeballs from Wall Street? Well, because the money's there. And for a while, and still to this day, there's ways that they can hide it and funnel it. By the way, this is the only industry this happens to. happens in the housing industry. Wall Street's just buying up houses now. They're buying up neighborhoods because they can. It's happening in other domains. I decided to pick on old folks because it's less partisan. Too many realtors already hate me for the shit I talk about real estate. So I didn't want to go down that path today. Maybe another day. But it's like, it also shows how you need the alphabet, executive branch to have the power to set rules that the experts then say this is needed. It's going to be weird that now this ruling that's now effective June 21st, 2024 can also be the Supreme Court can get together and say, nah, that looks too much like a law that's violating some constitutional right to privacy, and we're just going to say no, that doesn't have to be implemented. And so then we can say, well, the Supreme Court ruled that is no longer, that rule is not effective, and it's crossing boundaries of blah blah blah. The executive branch doesn't have that power. This is a real thing. Now, I paraphrased. I threw a lot of jumbled word salad there to get you the point of the debate that would happen. That would happen instantaneously of kind of what would transpire if you have this overriding ability by these judicial folks, and especially if they're appointees. It makes me tired, but it's short-circuiting, and it's throwing imbalance to what is supposed to be, by the founders, these three equal parts of the government that are supposed to work together to hold together this fucking experiment. And how we've been handling it has been a shit show. But when you see stuff like this come out, you're like, okay, if well explained, and you can argue whether or not I did that today, but if well explained, you can see how, all right, a ruling from this Department of Health makes total logical sense. Why would I want judges to come in and say, oh no, that doesn't make sense? They didn't do the study. They didn't do all the research. They don't understand the domain. These experts do. And so we're going to trust these experts to do that. And then when this happens, the private sector is going to have to deal with the changes. And what does that mean? They're going to have to, if they want to, there's no way out of this other than to add staffing. That's why he's saying it's going to kill the industry. But guess what? Somebody else will go, you know what? Wow, I can do it for a lot cheaper. I just won't pay myself an extra $200 million a year. I'll pay myself $50 million a year and watch what happens. Like, this is the kind of money we're talking about them playing with. Like, what's the, do you need 50 million to do whatever? I mean, it really is that simple. And why is Wall Street? No, well, Nate, they can extract more profit. Wall Street, get the fuck out of this domain. I don't know why the hell they're buying it if it's not so profitable. Well, let's make it so that it's no longer a profit center for grandma and grandpa. I'm telling you, all comes from this idea of having a profit center around healthcare. And I don't think it should exist. And neither should living in a house. I know I'm getting way off the map here, but we can get into, charging exorbitant amount of rent to old people that have no choice and packing them in a building, and then, saying 3 or 4 nurses in there to take care of 35 people that are in high need of care is stupid. And to call yourself a rest home, you should, there should be some baseline. So I think it's a good example that shows why good government. Now, you can argue that, this guy should be able to take advantage of your grandma and grandpa and your brothers and uncles, and they, the nurses just fuck off and they can just deal with it. They're probably a bunch of women anyway, so, what's it matter? And it's rural. Who's going to move to the rural area, Nate? You're not even talking about. No, this actually directly talks about the rural places versus non-rural having different timelines to execute on the ruling, because they're taking that into consideration. Maybe it's only a small increment. Maybe it's 1 or 2 days in some cases, but I think in a couple, it might be a couple years. So if you're paying a lot of money, why should a rural person get really shitty care? I mean, if there's a facility, if there's enough people out there to take care of somebody, then they should get good care. And so don't call yourself a facility unless you can provide the high level of care that should be the bare minimum for anyone you're throwing into that system. And again, not to disparage the entire domain, but come on. This ruling, when it's criticized by big players, you're going, okay, guys, you've been taken advantage of it. It looks like the squeeze is in. You've been caught. And you can see how incrementally more and more research started to realize how and where the money was going, to the point where now it's like the jig is up. You know, we need more transparency. By the way, why would this not exist in my utopia? We would have public health care. So sending somebody to a rest home wouldn't be an issue. We would have it be so nice that you could have a bed and everything taken care of out of your house, because we would support a system that would say, look, do you want to come to a hospital, or do you want to have personal care in your house? Yes, we could do that. Don't think that like rich people get that. You see it like, you know, Victorian, and they have all the doctors. I mean, I'm talking about bringing that shit to your house, high quality shit. Like, why not? Why not think like that? It's possible for rich people. Well, what do they have that you don't? Oh, they have money. Well, that's made up. It's all kind of made up. We all made this whole thing up. Remember? Come on, stay with me. Stay with me. Anyway, this is an interesting, probably nuanced, maybe I did it no justice example of the Biden administration radically improving the lives of a significant amount of people, not only workers. Being pro-worker, the unions are liking this because obviously it's getting more staffing, grow their ranks, get better wages for people that are in that union. But ultimately, for the consumer, the product should be care. The product shouldn't be old people aren't the product. And that's the way it's been looked at. It should be the care is the product, and the care should be however we can get that care to be of highest quality and actually applied, because it's only care when it's applied. Then that is the ultimate goal, not just profitability and so forth. So this puts a little dent in how they have to report, as well as how they have to interact with any kind of payment system to provide more transparency. So I think it's a good thing. I think everyone can understand why it's needed. You can understand why you would want to defer this to an agency as opposed to having the private sector come up with it. Look, Congress can't legislate their own pay, their own pay decreases or their own way to restrict them from buying stocks. The private market is way worse. Don't expect the private market to regulate themselves. Never, never. We see in a regulated government how these people can't regulate themselves. Do not think that profit won't drive every fucking thing into the maximum ultimate profit ability, and that is it. That is it. Not best in class, nothing. Maximum profitability. So think about that every time you make an argument for capitalism, because if that's what you want, what do you do with that profitability? What's it good for? Oh, we have a big pile of gold. People are dying. Ooh. Yeah. Anyway. All right. I'm off the cuff. Did I go over? Okay. I didn't even go an hour. That's sweet. This is, one of the challenges of running a campaign in general is that let's say you've done something like this. How do you put it into a commercial? Not everyone's going to buy it. You're going to find that some people are just going to go, and then, But this is a real thing that, I think Democrats or people who believe in good policy should do the hard work of not allowing yourself to be run on an issue based on a fucking meme. Because I didn't know all this shit. I don't know if I'm pro rest home or anti rest home, but I'm certainly anti-exploitation. And so this looks to me like a rule that's being driven by the fact that the private market wasn't able to regulate itself because the vulnerability and the greed was so high and significant that the government had to step in and do something. And I'm all for it. So, but it's hard to sell that to folks that are like, oh, it's the people over there on the other side of the wall that are coming here for why? Like, I just want to have that conversation. Why are they coming here again? Why are they coming? Not just to rob and steal and rape like you guys think. Again, no offense. I don't believe that at all. But this is just thinking through their thought process. They're coming here because they can get jobs. Who's hiring them? Is it your friends? It's a big business. Oh, it's big business. So it sounds really fucking weird. So, let's look into that before we start blaming the people that are leaving their families, walking miles and miles. You can't have these conversations because it's so much easier to just get some dumbass politician to run on the fact that they're so greedy on power, they're willing to say, you know what, it's their fault. Even though we're pissing on you locally, it's those people's fault. And so we end up with dumbass policy because people are like, yeah, it's fucking border, man. It's the border. The border is causing everything up here in Pennsylvania. The Texas border with Mexico, I wake up here in Lancaster, that's, about 300 miles from New York City. I wake up and I think, there's maybe 7 or 8 states between me and Texas and the border. And so I'm just like, all I think about is fucking, is there somebody coming over the fence and down at Texas? No, but you got my representative trying to make it that way. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the bullshit, kind of you have to go against. So this whole Biden's grandma plan that I think's it's fabulous. It's magnificent. It's wonderful if you ever had to deal with that industry and you want high quality care for folks and good wages for the folks that work in it. And you want the best of the best, then this is a great thing. But again, that's just tough. That's just a lot harder to say than blaming somebody else or, man, just doesn't Joe Biden suck and it's libtards this and blah. It's like, it's just like, all right. So, and by the way, there's things that Trump did do, not, I don't think of his own volition, but he did that could be talked about. And I can argue whether or not he had any part of it because of how he works and his brain works. But you could certainly make the case that there was a lot of things that he did that were good. And so where he gets lost is he can't spend any time on any of that. And so he's not going to get any votes for any of that. And he's going to lose himself there. So am I even making a case for Trump? Fuck no. And, I don't care if it was another Republican. Of course I would care. But Trump is a non-starter. We've talked about that ad nauseum. So I'm not going to get into that tonight. You know how I feel about it. It's not even a question. So don't think I'm getting soft or I'm like, somebody today actually said, well, are you voting for Trump? No, are you voting for Biden? The black vote seems to be a lot of people are not voting for Biden. I'm like, fucking, I hear that from fucking more white people than anyone. So I'm sorry if you're a brother and you're like, yeah, I'm voting for Trump. Just fucking discontinue because definitely you haven't been listening to my show. So, but anyway, no, it's a thing. So I don't buy every single narrative out there, but I think it's hard to get through any of the narrative with any substantive kind of work that's being done because it's hard to talk about. That's why I tried to be catchy by calling it Biden's grandma plan. That was the best I could. But really, it's the minimum staffing standards for long-term care facilities and Medicaid institutional payment transparency reporting rule. It's a final rule, and then it has an effective date, and it's done by one of these alphabet soup organizations Trump's trying to get rid of, and they're saying, oh, we need to shrink our government. These are experts. And then you start to see what it's doing and why it's needed and why you don't want this to go through a legislative body that can't decide whether or not, the world's going to break down because we have non-gender specific bathrooms. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. So you need these agencies to be able to execute for the executive branch, and this is how they do it, by the way. So I'm hoping we get a Supreme Court in there that's going to look at some of the dumb shit these folks have been doing, which has been bought and paid for, and we get them impeached. I know AOC is working on it. I'm serious. You look into that. Look, we'll go down that another day. We're sticking with Biden's grandma's plan. Check it out. Check out the ruling. Let me know what you think. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a no-brainer. Obviously, it came down to partisan lines again because there's one party that continues to say things like this is too much regulation. But we know after years and years of watching the increased profit and the lower bar of healthcare being provided at nursing facilities, it's only then when the government can step in. So this self-regulation idea that libertarians jerk off to can fucking eat it. And I've been seeing a lot of my friends who I know align with me with a lot of kind of core values that still are clinging to their Ayn Rand and their libertarian fantasies without actually thinking about what that fucking means. And so we'll get into that too. Anyway, Biden's grandma's plan, I like it. I like it a lot. I think that we need to do more of this stuff to get universal health care. This is where Republicans get scared. But I would like to see like more rulings like this where they can just say, look, this is a security issue. For instance, COVID is biological stuff is a security issue now. So we need to have a public health care, public infrastructure to support rapid responses and everyone getting preventive care in case they need it for whatever kind of symptoms they might be getting for anything. Certainly if it's airborne, you want people getting rid of their colds really quickly. So public health care is a security issue. I wish we'd put it on the Pentagon's. I wish we would get like a slice of, all right, whatever the Pentagon gets, let's just throw a third at, or let's just throw, let's throw a third and let's throw half of what the Pentagon gets towards health care every year. Just throw extra half. But this is directly going to health care, and we can say that this is providing way more security because we're allowing people to fucking live. Anyway, I'm not going to make those arguments. Biden's grandma's plan, interesting. It just passed. You're seeing the blowback from larger facilities. I'm not saying this is a local. That's why I like that this is something happening in Oklahoma. I don't know this guy. But it's typical. We know how this shit works. It's not like I'm making this up or being conspiratorial. Somebody came to the page and was like, is this a conspiracy page? Because I posted one thing that I did fact check that talked about how things can be scrubbed from your feed. It happens all the time. So sometimes people get caught up in a jail and you can't get out. I was in it. But if you don't have it, it doesn't happen to you. You just think, oh, everything's fine. Anyway, so I'm about looking at reality. I know things can be conspiratorial, but when you're putting this together and looking at all the way the machinations work of everything, you start to see patterns, and I'm a fucking pattern guy, dude. Come on. Anyway, I think I'm coming up to my time limit here because I don't want to break an hour. It just does throw off my work flow. Didn't have any too many cancellations here on my screen. Let me know what you think in the comments. I don't know if anybody commented or watched. What do I see here? Oh, wow. Wow, we have some comments. The reason there's no staffing is because of the pay. I work in this field. Done it for a year. The kids work at the gas station up the street making the same as I'm getting. Take care of your loved one. I won't stop because I love human. Oh, good. That's great. I love that comment. So somebody just left a comment. Lori, just talking about how she works in the industry and she loves it. And this is the kind of folks that you absolutely, by the way, this is why I don't want to disparage the industry, because there's folks that are in this industry because they love it and not for the pay. And that's awesome. But I think that folks that should be able to get a living wage and get paid, and not have to compete with. And by the way, I'm not suggesting the folks down at McDonald's shouldn't be able to buy a house. I really believe that we all should be able to make a living wage. So that's a great comment, though. And I think what this ruling would be for you, if you work in that industry, is it'd be a good thing. You want better pay. You also want better staffing. And they're going to have to do both with this ruling. They're going to have to pay more because there's a rule that have to apply that says you have to have so much going towards not administrative stuff, but staffing. And so before, the staffing requirement was like these entities also had a staffing company. And so they could just say, well, we're staffing it internally. You're getting paid from this staffing company that's kind of a side jaunt. And that's how these larger ones would work. Well, that's going to be more difficult to do because they're going to have to provide where the actual money is going towards staffing. And then to make the numbers work, they're going to have to increase their staffing. So they're squeezing the domain because we know there's more profit in there that they're not showing and they have been hiding for years. So for folks in the industry, you're going to see more bitching and complaining. You might see people complaining at your work that are managers or people that were repeating the stuff that they're hearing from the owners. But the truth is, this ruling is to improve a lot of the things that you probably see on a regular basis. So I love the comment. Thank you for that. That was awesome. I went to the comments and there was a comment. We're making it, folks. We're gonna make our dreams come true. Thank you, Lori. No, I'm kidding. Look, I can't sing, but I'm excited because Usually I look down and I look at the comments and there's nobody, and boom, Lori shows up. That was dope. So great point. I think this is relevant. It's something that everyone can chew on. You can't argue that, oh, Biden's trying to destroy the world or even destroy an industry. He's saying, look, provide more staffing. We'll give you more money, but you got to show your cards and you got to pay and you got to provide a certain level of quality because you haven't been self-monitoring. And this happens in every single domain. The hope is that you can self-monitor, but any domain left to its own devices, you're going to find loopholes. That's just how capitalism works. When profitability is the only thing you're really aiming for, you're going to quarterly shave off every single thing to get profit, profit, profit. If you don't have any other vision other than profit, you're going to fucking lose. Think about that in your own life too. If you're chasing profit or money, you're going to fucking lose all the time. I'm telling you from personal experience. Every single time I fucking look up and think I need some fucking big payout, I get the payout and I'm like, fuck, you know what? I can't do this. So, that's my own personal demon. I get tired of things real quick. You got to fucking keep me fucking purposeful. I will run the place. I will make sure that I'm running it soon. Just jokes. Anyway, so Biden couldn't articulate what I just did. I know he had a good day today with the press conference. It looked better. I saw a couple stumbles. I watched about 85% of it. And the only reason I didn't watch 100 is because it was on and I was kind of had it in the background. I just kind of got distracted for some of it. So it was better, but I'm not leaning on, oh, wow, now everything's different. Nothing's changed for me after the debate thing. So, but Biden's policies are effective, and Biden's grandma's plan, people should be talking about this. More hoopla about stuff like this, and this is good policy. So anyway, want to say thanks to everybody. You guys are killing it. Thanks for the comment, Lori. That's dope. I love it. I was able to kind of handle the comments, so I don't know if that'll make the YouTube version, which literally comes out at the same time every other version is. My team of editors has been slacking lately, but my design team, and I got to give props to the researchers because they've been giving good content. So bravo. Let's see. Oops. That's the one I wanted to do. All right, not the wah. Make sure you follow me on YouTube. Make sure you watch the video. Put it on YouTube and just let it run. Jokes aside, make sure you check out my YouTube channel, Smashing the Party 3216. Don't know why I got that. TikTok Smash the Party, Instagram Smash the Party, Nate Bomberger Nightcap. We're going to raise the tempo here soon, folks. I'm going to hit the streets again. I know I get a lot of comments internally in my inbox. I don't know why people aren't. I know why. It's okay. I'll take them in my inbox. You can still send them in my inbox. I'm okay with it. I'd rather have the comments on my page, but I'm not going to complain about any comment. Thank you for all the comments. But about the interviews and just more interacting with people, because they enjoyed that. So it's coming. After Hours is coming. I haven't forgot. I pulled the soft launch on that trigger, and now I've got other ideas that going to turn that volume up. There's folks, by the way, locally, they're doing some really good stuff that are inspiring me. So if you're out there and you're somebody local, Jimmy, TCP group, all these other folks doing this stuff, JCP group or somebody else, I check out your stuff, The Spark. I watch other people's stuff locally. And I do try to support it and at least share it sometimes, as well as I take ideas from it. So I don't care if people do it from me locally as well. And I hope that's not bothering people. And sometimes I'm pretty blatant about something I really liked. Like if I saw a Sharon or something on somebody's show, I'll make it for my own. Anyway, I'm rambling. Hope you enjoyed tonight's little more educational yet nuanced mention of the Biden dance, the Biden grandma's plan, that I think Democrats should be talking about. More of this, less of Trump. Let's get away from the fucking gotcha or, asking them, every single representative and senator, what they think about what Trump said. Let's ask the fucking people about these policies that they're building, which I will talk to you about the next, not maybe this week, but next week. I definitely want to have it so that I can get on here and show you a couple lives that I've been watching. I've been watching the congressional stuff happen on a side as I'm working, and I have it set up that we can start talking about it. And it's interesting because you get to see their debates. You can go in, watch their debates live on the Congress floor for a specific issue. And I think we're going to start talking about that. So, look, we're going to get into the details. If you're fucking thinking it's going to be nerdy government bullshit, I'm funny too. So stay tuned. We're growing this shit. I'm loving the interaction. I love the comments. Thank you, Lori, for watching. We'll be back on Monday. There's a possibility, 85% chance you're going to see something on Saturday night on After Hours. So stay tuned. Either way, if you didn't watch any of the previous episodes, go on YouTube, put it on auto play queue, hit the subscribe button, and just fall asleep. Put that stuff on the background, listen to it, absorb it, join the fucking party. Have a good night.